Good morning, everyone. I hope you had a great weekend. Today, we're going to be starting the Pythagorean theorem. The Pythagorean theorem is a way for us to find missing sides of right triangles. Okay. The first thing you have to understand before doing these kind of problems is what the parts of the right triangle are. Obviously, all right triangles will have a right angle right there. The two sides that form the right angle are called the legs, and the side across from the right angle, which is always the longest side, is called the hypotenuse. It is very important when doing these problems to be able to identify the hypotenuse. Okay? Now, the Pythagorean theorem states that the sum of the squares of the length of the legs equals the square of the length of the hypotenuse. Okay? So right here, I've labeled a triangle with A and B for the legs and C for the hypotenuse. These are the letters in the theorem. A and B are always used for legs. C is always used in the hypotenuse. So, what the Pythagorean theorem actually sets up for us is this equation. You take A and square it, you take B and square it, and you add those together, and that's going to equal C squared. Okay? C has to be the hypotenuse. It is vital that you recognize the hypotenuse because it's got to be over here by itself. Okay? Like I told you before, we use these to find missing sides of like triangles. Here are how the problems are going to set up. This particular problem, I'm missing the hypotenuse, so I've got to find the hypotenuse. So this question mark right here will become C. That's C in our problem, because remember, it's A and B is the legs, C is the hypotenuse. Now, it does not matter which one you call A and which one you call B. I've just always done it, the smaller one's A, the bigger one's B. But remember, C is the vital one. That's the one you have to get over on the other side of the equation. So let's look at how we set this up. First thing we should do is write down our formula here. Pythagorean theorem says a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So I go ahead and put that every time, and then I plug in what I know. Now in this case, I made 3a, 4b, and c is my missing side. So now I have an equation that I can solve. Okay? Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'll square these two numbers. So 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, c squared is obviously still c squared. Now, all I got to do is collect those terms. 9 plus 16 is 25. Now we're back to what we were doing last week. We're solving with a square root because we have a square to get rid of. So we take the square root of each side, which I did right here, and you'll find out that c is 5. Now, notice I did not say plus or minus 5, and I address that later in the notes. We're dealing with lengths. Lengths can never be negative, so I don't have to worry about the negative. So when you're doing Pythagorean theorem problems or when you're finding lengths, you never have to use the negative, just use the positive. All right? Now, the other case that we'll have is when we have to find a missing leg. Okay? Now, in this case, I went ahead and called the missing side A because it was in that spot. All right? So I've got A is missing, 4 is my other leg, I'll call that one B, 6 is my hypotenuse, that has to be C. Okay? So I set up my equation, I got A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And then I just plug in what I know. I don't know A, so it stays A. 4 is B, 6 is C. Okay? So I've got a squared plus 4 squared equals 6 squared. I go ahead and square these numbers. 4 squared is 16, 6 squared is 36. Now I just solve the equation like what we were doing all last week. I'll subtract the 16 from each side. I get a squared equals 20. Okay? Now I'm going to do the square root of each side. Now, notice here when I do the square root of a squared is a. The square root of 20 is not a perfect square, so I cannot just take the square root. I have to find it. I'm going to do that using a calculator, and normally we're going to round it to the nearest tenth. So when it's not a perfect square, you're going to end up getting a decimal, okay? So when I do the square root of 20, very simply, I look for the square key on the calculator. That's the x squared. It's normally over on the left-hand side of the calculator. Most calculators, you'll see x squared. Right above it, you'll see a square root symbol. So the way I get the square root to come up in the calculator is I'll hit second x squared. So the second key, then the x squared key, and a square root will come up. Then you just type the 20 in under it, hit enter, and you'll see it's 4.5 when you round to the nearest tenth. Most all the problems we're going to do will round it to the nearest tenth. Okay. Every once in a while, you might see it left as a radical. You may see the answer just in multiple choice answers will say the square root of 20. That's very, very seldom in the 8th grade, okay? Most of the time, we're going to round it to the 10th. All right? So that's how we solve that problem. Just remember, the square root of 20 is not a perfect square, so you have to use your calculator. Again, I'm not doing the positive and the negative, the plus or minus, because it's a length. I don't need the negative. All right? Now, one of the biggest mistakes is misidentifying the hypotenuse. I have found the easiest way to not do that is look at the right triangle symbol. This symbol always points at the hypotenuse because the hypotenuse is across from it. Where it gets weird is when they turn these triangles around and do different things with them. But if you follow this, if you'll just look at the corner of the right triangle symbol and go straight across, you are going to find the hypotenuse. Doesn't matter which way you turn it. Find the corner, go straight across. That's the hypotenuse. Works every time. Okay? Now, you're going to have some problems today. You're only going to be finding missing hypotenuses today. Tomorrow, we're going to work on finding the missing legs. And then Wednesday, we'll be back here in a session and we're going to work on doing both. Okay? All right. Well, that's it for today. I will be having the session at 10 and 11. So come on in. I can help you with any of this and I'll go over it all of it in the session. Hope y'all have a great day and hopefully see you soon. Bye.